Hey everyone, welcome back to Falcons Central Radio Show on the Pro Football Central Radio Network. I'm Aaron Freeman, founder of FalcFans.com. I'm joined by my co-host Scott Karasik, who covers the Falcons for Pro Football Spot, and we are back this week to talk about the Atlanta Falcons. We will be talking about their first preseason action, the fast and physical Atlanta Falcons under new head coach Dan Quinn. They beat the Tennessee Titans last Friday. We will get to that. But first, we'll talk a little bit about some of the roster moves that the Falcons made earlier this week in camp. We'll talk about some of the more recent camp news involving some certain players coming back from injury and other players going or that have gotten injured. And then at the end of the show, as usual, we will answer your many mailbag questions. We appreciate everybody that sent in a mailbag question this week. We have a very busy show this week. So, Scott, let's get these roster moves out of the way first. We always usually talk about any of the little roster moves that the Falcons make. But, I'm looking at some of these guys that the Falcons signed, like Travis Howard and Terrell Manning and Evan Royster. I would say that probably more so than some past moves that the team usually makes at this time of year. These aren't strictly camp bodies because I do feel like, especially a guy like Royster, who knows the scheme, and considering the Falcons are pretty hurting at depth right now, I think he has an outside shot of making the team. Do you feel the same way, or do you think I'm crazy?
I think you're not too far off, but I still think Jerome Smith would beat him out in the end.
Okay. You feel like Teron Ward has stepped up? He's been getting a lot of first-team reps this last week.
I don't know why. He has no field vision. The entire time I was watching him against the Titans, I was like, man, if he was good, he would have cut through that wide-open hole 2 steps to his left. Instead, he runs right into the backs. Now, the good news about Teron Ward is he's not Trent Richardson, so he doesn't have these high expectations on him. But I came away really disappointed watching him on film. He was just very meh. Not great, not amazing, just he was there.
Okay. With Royster, I think, if you're going to point to a positive with him, the 2 games that he started in Kyle Shanahan's offense, he got 100 yards in both of those games. And then a guy by the name of Alfred Morris showed up and sort of stole his thunder. But he might be a guy. And I really liked Terrell Manning when he came out of school. I thought he was going to be really good in the NFL. He hasn't quite hit his stride. I think he's a classic case of a player that, whether due to injuries or playing in different schemes, he's played for the Falcons are his 8th team since he came in the league like 3 or 4 years ago. So, maybe finally Dan Quinn and Jeff Ulbrich will be able to tap into that ability that I thought made him a potential 2nd or 3rd round pick when he came out in 2012. But we'll see. Obviously, I don't think the Falcons are really hurting that much for linebacker depth. I thought Japo Bartu did some good things in that game. I thought Tyler Starr did some good things in that game. So we'll see if Manning fits in. And Travis Howard, I don't know much about him. He's a big corner. I guess that's a positive. But it does seem like the Falcons already have their 5 corners, so I don't necessarily see him sticking. But do you have any thoughts on those 2 guys?
I mean, Manning's a guy who has been on a lot of practice squads, he's a solid athlete, but he just doesn't have it up here for some reason. I don't know what's missing. I don't know what the issue is, but I went back and watched basically every snap he had in the NFL, and he's just not instinctual at all. He's a great athlete, just not instinctual. So.
Okay. All right. Well, to make room for some of these guys, the Falcons cut DeMarcus Love and Damian Parms. No big deal. I think we all kind of saw them as camp bodies. There was maybe a sliver of a hope because the Falcons' offensive tackle depth was so bad that maybe Love would finally click for him. But we'll talk a little bit about some of the guys that have emerged at offensive tackle that kind of made Love's roster spot moot when we get to the Titans game review. But first, let's talk about some of these injuries. Now, the positive thing is this week we've gotten Tevin Coleman and Devontae Freeman back from their hamstring injuries. They've been slowly mixed into practice. They started off with individual drills on Monday. Tuesday, as we are recording this, they were back to full team drills. So I guess the question is, they're progressing probably quicker than we expected. Should they play this Friday night against the Jets, or do you think the Falcons should just play it safe and wait till the third preseason game?
I mean, if they'll only play like 5-6 snaps, sure, I'm cool with it. But anything other than that, nah, they shouldn't play.
Okay. Well, we wish them a speedy recovery, and I guess we'll probably talk about it a little bit later when we talk about that Titans game. But we do need some running backs to sort of step up, and the running game did not look. That was probably one of the biggest blemishes in the offense on last Friday. So getting Devontae and Tevin Coleman back will be a big boost to that, hopefully. Some of the more recent injuries, guys that have been nicked up. William Moore went down today with a calf strain. Desmond Trufant has basically sat out since, I think, Wednesday with a shoulder strain. Obviously, Anton Smith had his hamstring issue injured in the Titans game. Do you think these three guys being out of the lineup is going to create some opportunities for some young guy to step up and sort of, be that next man up and maybe get a shot at the roster that he probably wouldn't have gotten if all three of these guys were healthy?
I mean, if Moore is out for any sort of time, that might make your boy Charles Godfrey a little bit more likely to make the roster, or even Robinson Teresi. If Trufant's out for a little bit, I don't really think that affects it too much. It might give Desmond Salvador an extended look at corner, but he should not be playing cornerback. And then Anton Smith, he's got a roster spot. If his hamstring hurts and they got to put him on the PUP list, they'll put him on the PUP list and keep Jerome Smith or someone like that for a couple weeks, and then bring him back and basically they're going to take a practice squad caliber guy and cut him when he comes back.
Okay. So I think we both agree that all three of these guys are pretty much locks to make the team, regardless of their injury status. Because these guys might miss, Trufant's supposed to come back this week later in practice. We won't know if he's going to play it Friday, but it sounds like he's going to be back soon. And I'm assuming Anton's recovery time is going to be similar to what Devontae's and Coleman. Maybe he sits out an extra week, but that basically means he'll be ready to go week one. And we don't know the status on Willie Moe's calf, but hopefully it's not anything serious. Do you think the Falcons have the depth right now to sort of get by for the next week or two at these spots? Or do you think about – okay. Well, that answered my question.
I mean, Trufant's – as long as Trufant can start playing at the beginning of the season, I'm not worried about him, sucking up, being horrible, any of that. He's Desmond Trufant and left cornerback. His role in the scheme is not going to change all that much, so he'll be fine. Anton Smith, he's got the same role he had last year. Change of pace. He might get more carries, but that's about it. And William Moore, I mean, his role got modified to where he's not covering deep nearly as much. So if he's gone, he'll be fine. And I think Kamal Ishmael fits the role a lot better now that he doesn't have to cover deep.
Yeah.
And be on an island deep against guys like Calvin Johnson and Golden Tate and whoever else burned him last year.
There's a couple of names on that list. Yeah, I agree with you. It doesn't seem like it's too dire at those positions. We'll see how it goes. All right, let's talk about the thing that we're here to talk about, the main thing that we want to talk about. Let's get into this Falcons-Titans game. So I guess, Scott, we'll talk a little bit about who we thought stood out, and then we'll talk a little bit about what we want to see more of or less of in this upcoming game against the Jets. But, one of the big takeaways from offense is everybody's clamoring for Sean Renfree to be the backup quarterback and definitely outplayed TJ Yates on Friday. So where do you stand on this backup quarterback position? Is it a wrap on TJ Yates? Is Sean Renfree locked in? Where do you stand on it?
Yates needs to improve tremendously. Otherwise, he's done. He's just not worth it. He was missing high. He was missing wide. He should have been intercepted 5 or 6 passes that I counted that were just dangerously horrible passes. That because there was no Titan in the area, that's the only reason why there was no interception there. Like, he threw it in the middle of 4 Titans defenders right over Justin Hardy's head on one play, and I was like, man, if the Titans had competent defenders, that's a pick 6.
Okay. All right. I don't want to sound like a TJ Yates apologist, but I will cut him a little bit of slack because I do think he was dealing a lot with Tyler Columbus not playing well, and basically whoever Tyler Columbus was blocking was in his face. And so I think that led to some of the accuracy issues. There were other plays where he was inaccurate, where he didn't have pressure. So obviously I can't excuse it all. And I do think, Sean Renfrey had, basically only had 1 series worth of work, had a clean pocket. His wide receivers were wide open. So I think the degree of difficulty that Sean Renfrey had versus TJ Yates isn't exactly factored in, but it's undeniable that Renfrey was accurate on his throws, threw with good timing, was decisive and whatnot, and Yates just didn't look comfortable. And it would be nice to sort of see this upcoming week against the Jets if Sean Renfrey can get some work with the twos so that we have a fair sample. I want to see how Sean Renfrey handles playing behind an offensive line where Tyler Columbus is blocking for him. So that would be a real test to see where he's at.
What's sad is that Eric Lefeld and I forget the third string guy's name. Matt Huffer and who was the other guy that played right tackle? Just signed him. Pierce Burton.
Yeah.
Pierce Burton looked good.
Yeah.
He looked really good. Very fluid athlete. Might be the second best right tackle on the team. Behind Ryan Trader. So if the Falcons end up breaking camp and Pierce Burton and Jake Rogers are the backup tackles, I wouldn't be shocked. Because I agree with you. The play from the right tackle spot with the second string was horrible. It was scary bad. But Yates still had enough time in the pocket to get off those 3-step drops. And that's really where the offense thrives. Matt Ryan was dropping back 3, gunning it in there, having no issues. Completed passes to the friggin' fullback.
Yeah. Well, I'll say this for Yates. He did start to look a little bit better when they started doing a little bit more play action and rolling him out of the pocket, basically because he was getting away from Tyler Columbus's man. But it's one of those things where you're right. He has to execute those pocket throws to make this offense work, especially if we're in a situation come November or whenever where, Matt Ryan, for whatever reason isn't playing and one of these guys is thrust into the lineup. Right now, I don't trust either one of these guys to basically be able to step in and win a game if the Falcons' playoff hopes are on the line. Renfrey's probably got a slight edge, but I need to see more because, in all honesty, this was probably the first time in 3 summers that I've thought, oh, Sean Renfrey played well. I thought he's been okay the last 2 years. But, so basically one good series does not make you a backup quarterback in the NFL. Otherwise we would have Doug Johnson and Dominique Davis backing up Matt Ryan. So.
Damn. Cold but true.
All right. So, what also did stand out? I noticed, Scott, you were tweeting some of your thoughts from the Titans game earlier this afternoon, and you talked a little bit about Levine Toilolo. What were your thoughts on his production?
He went from a guy who had no idea what the hell he was doing, trying to run those stick and stop and go routes, and the ins and outs, and he just was running all sort like the basic 4-route tree that Tony Gonzalez ran, and he looked miserable running it. Then you put him in a zone, or not a zone, but the West Coast style passing attack that a Shanahan runs, and it's almost identical to the West Coast attack that Jim Harbaugh ran when he was in college. And you see it just click for him. Like, it just looked like it clicked for him. Like, his blocking was working because he got back into his own scheme. He was basically just getting his big body in the way, which is all he has to do on the backside. He was engaging on the front side. He looked like he could block, which was huge. He was running good routes. He was getting open. He was catching balls that were thrown to him with ease. One of them looked like he shouldn't have even caught it because it was on the sideline, and he had to make an acrobatic catch and somehow had his knee in bounds and the ball in his hand at the same time. And you're just like, man, this guy could be really good if he somehow puts it all together. He really could be good if he puts it all together.
I agree with you. I can't add anything else. What were your thoughts on the offensive line? Big deal last week was John Asamoah getting benched to the second team in favor of guys like James Stone and Chris Chester. I guess, what are your thoughts on those three guys' performances, and should Asamoah get his starting job back, or do you think the Falcons might be able to roll with Stone and Chester as their starters?
As solid as Stone looked, he is not a starter in the NFL. What I saw out of Stone was a guy who's going to look very, very good on game days, coming in, working with the offensive line as a backup. Guy's going to come in on special teams, play a guard role, and look really good there. A guy who's going to come in if Asamoah or Chester goes down and look really good. Chester looked good. Asamoah looked great. Asamoah might be one of the top 10 guards in the NFL in this scheme. He really looks good in this scheme. It's a really good fit for him. And Chester looked like he could pass block. Asamoah looked like he could pass block. Stone still, that's where Stone's failing right now, is pass blocking.
Okay. All right.
So if it ends up, it's Chester, Hawley, Asamoah, or maybe it's Asamoah, Hawley, Chester. Who cares? Who cares what side they're on? As long as they're up front protecting Matt Ryan and doing a good job of it, like Jake Matthews was doing, like Ryan Schrader was doing, I think they'll be fine. The name that surprised me out of all of them was Jake Rogers. He legitimately looks like he's the second best left tackle on this team. It's weird when you have two guys that understand how to move their feet and keep their body in between them and the quarterback, keep their back mirrored to where their butt's at a 90-degree angle. Like, here's the quarterback, here's the line, like lineman, and the defender's right here, and he's just keeping himself in between the lineman and the defender. That's beautiful to see. A guy who actually knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
Right, like Rogers is the most polished Division I AA left tackle that I've seen in a long time. Like, you don't see guys that from that level play as good as he did in their first preseason game. He just knew what the hell he was doing in pass blocking, and he was a serviceable run blocker. And I think he could win the swing tackle job this year.
Okay. Yeah, I was pleasantly surprised by Rodgers. I thought he was going to be this raw sort of guy that, flashed some things, but, I questioned a little bit of his functional strength coming out of Eastern Washington. And that didn't seem to be an issue against the Titans. So I'm looking forward to see, what improvements, or if he can maintain this level of play throughout the rest of the summer, especially if he's going to be working at left tackle. Now, switching gears, Scott, to the defensive line, my boy Jonathan Babineau, making plays, getting only 5 snaps, but making plays. And, people were pretty excited about this guy by the name of Rashid Hageman. I never really heard of him before, but, I think he's got a shot of making this team. I don't know.
I think when Brian Cox said, hey, this guy earned the starting job, I mean, he looks good. He looks really good playing the 3 technique. He and Babs are not athletically the same player, but in terms of what they're good at and what they need to be doing within a scheme, that 3 technique is the perfect fit for both of them. Soliai looked really good playing the 1. Claiborne looked good playing the 1 in the sub package. It was fun watching Vic Beasley go out there and get after the passer. It was even more fun watching Schofield and Tyson Jackson and Soliai get after the passer. I was shocked. And yeah, that sack that Tyson Jackson had, that was probably a coverage sack because Mariota looked downfield, didn't see anybody open, and said, oh shit, there's Soliai right in front of me. 330-pound dude about to tackle the shit out of me. But last year, Soliai didn't even get there. Jackson doesn't even get past his man to clean up that sack. So the fact that they even did that was huge. I'm excited for the pass rush. Because of that pass rush, the Falcons got that interception with Justin Durant. Because of the pass rush, they got the fumble recovery touchdown. You know, without pass rush, this defense would probably suck again. But because of Dan Quinn and because of Brian Cox, they have a pass rush. And the run defense doesn't look like shit either. Like, the overall team could legitimately have an average defense this year, Aaron. Like 15 to 18 ranked defense.
Okay.
And not just in points scored.
It'll be interesting to see. I'm not gonna jump full steam onto that 15th ranked defense bandwagon, but they do a good job against the Jets. If they do a good job against the Dolphins, then call me converted, I guess. But they'll obviously be better. Don't get me wrong. We're really splitting hairs about where are they going to be 15th ranked or 18th or 21st or whatever. It doesn't really matter. I think if the offense is scoring 30 points a game, then they don't need to be great for us to win a lot of games this year. So they just got to be good enough. So you talk about the pass rush, and Stanley Mapanga was getting a lot of reps. I think he played the most snaps of anybody on defense, playing that Leo spot behind Vic Beasley. And, it seems like Beasley's a lock. Well, it seems like, yeah, I'm pretty sure Beasley's a lock. Schofield seems like he's a lock since they didn't bother, he was basically playing with the starters and then they pulled him. It was a little question of was Mapanga on the bubble if he had, one foot in the door. Do you think this performance helped him get both feet in the door? You think he's now a good bet to make the roster, or do you still think he's got to do a little bit more?
He probably has to do a little bit more, but it's more on run defense than pass rush. He did get washed out a couple times in run D. He did get locked up with the left tackle a couple times. Got pushed out of the way and shouldn't have been pushed out of the way. Now, don't get me wrong, he's still Stanley Mapanga. He's still got the best first step out of all the guys on the second team. So he's worth keeping. It's just how good can he get as a run defender? Because he does stand a shot at getting cut.
Okay. And your boy Tyler Starr looked pretty good. Last summer it was kind of like, okay, you see a little bit of that ability, but you didn't see the sort of splash plays that you wanted to see. And it probably, not to diss Tyler Starr, but he probably made the team largely because he was drafted as opposed to necessarily out-producing a guy like Jacquez Smith or anything like that. But now you're like, and I think we went into this offseason thinking, okay, well, he's probably not a strong bet to make the team, but now it seems like things are turning around for him. Do you agree?
He looked better at strong side linebacker than Schofield did, and better than Bierman did. He just looked more athletic and able to play in coverage. Now, of course, Schofield and Bierman are going to make the team, but my prediction of maybe one of them getting cut seems a little bit more likely now.
Yeah. I think Starr now, the good thing for Starr is that he's still practice squad eligible. But if he keeps this up, I don't even know if he's going to clear waivers if he does get cut. So it's one of those things where there might be a tough choice that the Falcons have to make at the end of the summer if he keeps this up. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, but if the tough choice is cut Bierman or cut Starr, I hate to put it this way, but I'd rather cut Starr when you know you've got untapped potential there, and Bierman you know is on the decline.
Okay.
And didn't look amazing in the scheme.
Okay. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the secondary. A lot of people making a big deal about Jalen Collins. I'm curious to know how you feel about his struggles and where he's at.
If the season started tomorrow, I'd rather see Kevin White play nickel than Jalen Collins or Phillip Adams or Desmond Southward. Collins, he's raw. You knew he was raw coming in. You knew there were issues with his hand placement. You knew he was a little over aggressive. You knew he was grabby. A whole bunch of different things that you saw that you knew it was coming and you saw it coming. So when it comes to the games and you're seeing him be grabby and seeing him miss plays, you're like, that sounds about right. This looks like the same exact Jalen Collins because he hasn't had the time in practice to get acquainted to the scheme, to get real coaching, to have Raheem Morris come up and be like, hey, you look like an idiot out there. Fix yourself. So don't get me wrong, I like him, but he's still that raw ball of clay right now.
Yeah, I agree. I was a little surprised with some of his struggles, but it wasn't like shocked with some of the issues. Yeah, he wasn't playing with the cleanest technique, and you can get burned in the NFL when your technique is off. So it's one of those things where I think part of it is there was a lot of hype after the draft that he was going to beat out Robert Alford for the starting job. I think both, if I recall correctly, both you and I, Scott, didn't really put a whole lot of stock in that, just because, he wasn't, And so I think that's probably part of the reason why I think people are overreacting a little bit, because there were such high expectations that he would immediately come in and play like a starter. And I think, some people, someone put it to me the other day, Falcon fans have been a little spoiled by Desmond Trufant. And so they just assume, oh, every corner is going to come in and immediately be good. And in reality, Desmond Trufant wasn't that good his first preseason.
He wasn't that good his first 5 weeks.
Yeah, that's a fair statement too. And it's one of those things where people kind of forget that. And it's not to say that, oh, Jalen Collins is going to be, by the end of the season, he's going to be Desmond Trufant. But it's one of those things where it takes time to develop corners. And cornerback is one of those positions where guys usually struggle early in their NFL careers, because the jump in talent at wide receiver, when you all of a sudden you're going from covering, some 5'8" guy like Bernard Reedy. No offense to Bernard Reedy, but when you're a 6'2" cornerback and you basically can just put your hands up Bernard Reedy and shut him down in college, and then all of a sudden now you're being asked to cover Andre Johnson or whoever. It's a big jump in talent, and guys got to learn. And I think Jalen Collins, took some growing pains, some lumps, and I think he'll be better for it. But it's one of those things where I agree with you, Scott. With guys like Kevin White stepping up, then I'm not too worried about it. I'm not losing any sleep over this. So
the jump from the Bernard Reedy and Justin Hardys of the world to the Julio Jones, Roddy White, Golden Tate, even Kendall Wrights of the world is a big jump. Hell, Harry Douglas was a big jump for him because he wasn't amazing. He wasn't polished. He wasn't a great football player in college. He was a great athlete with potential. So that was the issue.
Okay. All right. Well, let's cap this off with some talk about these safeties. Obviously, Willie Moe didn't get a lot of work, but, he's Willie Moe, so there's no real reason to worry about that. What did you think of Kamal Ishmael and Ricardo Allen? Obviously, Allen is being expected to be the starter. Obviously, Ishmael I think we all agree is pretty much a lock to be a backup. So where do you think those guys, and if any of the other safeties, where do you think they stood out?
I'm going to be honest with you. I didn't see Allen really flash, but I also didn't see him do anything horrible either. He had one play where he took kind of a bad angle, but it was just more that he didn't have the raw, unadulterated speed to make the tackle on the edge against a guy like Devin McCluster, who's tough to make that tackle against. So outside of that one play, I didn't see him, which for a free safety who plays in center field, he wasn't challenged. He was, covering his guys that he needed to cover. I think he did a pretty good job. William Moore, Kamal Ishmael, they really stood out in the scheme. They looked really good. They looked really comfortable. They play against the run. They're in the box all the time. I think this is a perfect fit for them.
Okay. I'm a little concerned about it. I agree with everything you said, but I'm a little concerned about our safety depth. My boy Charles Godfrey did some good things in run support, but his coverage abilities were not quite up to par. I thought, Robinson Therese had the interception, but he looked like his range and speed were a little issue. He got that pick largely because Mettenberger underthrew that pass. That should have been a touchdown, if not for Corey Bierman getting some pressure on Mettenberger. And so it's one of those things where I'm a little concerned about our safety depth, but that's not a new thing. That seems to happen every summer. And, I'm a little worried that if, safeties are the most injury-prone position in the NFL, at least on defense. And if Ricardo Allen gets hurt, I don't want Kamal Ishmael playing center field again. Let him be the strong safety. I don't want to see that again. So I'm a little concerned. We'll have to see how these guys play out the rest of the summer, but I don't know if we have a good backup free safety. That's all I'll say.
I think Desmond Salvord would fit that a lot better. I really do. Because he looked out of position playing left corner, like he was having trouble processing it. At deep safety, he's already deep. He doesn't have to process as much information as just keep everybody in front of me. That's his job. So I feel like he'd be a lot better off as a deep safety in the scheme. And I think eventually he'll get moved back there because he's just not a good fit for what they're trying to do on the edge right now. But
okay.
I think I know you're not a fan of him and his instincts and where he fits, but I think out of the options that are available between Sean Baker, Robinson Therese, Charles Godfrey, and Desmond Salvord, and if you're talking about a last resort free safety, I'd rather have Salvord over any of those other three guys.
I wish I could disagree with you, Scott, but I think if you're, I think when you're scraping the bottom of the barrel, and no offense to those guys you just named, but that's the way it looks right now, then yeah, Desmond Salvord looks slightly better than that. But I honestly don't feel like if he's the guy, my thing with Salvord is this. I think people need to stop treating him like he's a third-round pick. He's basically a sixth-round pick that we reached on. And if he was a sixth-round pick, no one would be talking about him deserving a shot at making this team. They would just be like, yeah, he's just a guy, we'll cut him, no big deal. And I think that's the situation. I think he's not a good fit at corner. He's never really played that position. I don't think he's, what he did last year when he was asked to play zone, he was completely lost. And I don't think that's a Mike Nolan scheme thing. I just, no one else was lost. Like Kamal Ishmael's struggle in zone wasn't necessarily because he was lost, it's just because he was slow. So it's one of those things where you have to be a good instinctual zone safety to play that spot behind Ricardo Allen. And I think right now, unless one of these other guys step up, then I think the Falcons need to start looking at options outside of Atlanta. But right now, you're right. Southwood's probably the best candidate right in-house, and we'll see what happens. But, maybe he'll get a shot later this preseason to play some safety and prove me wrong, but we'll see. All right. So, Scott, we talked about the Titans game. We got the Jets game coming up. In the back of my mind, I still haven't quite jumped full steam in the Dan Quinn mode because I remember last summer where the Falcons showed some decent things in that first preseason game, and then they looked like absolute trash against the Texans. The Jets are a much better matchup for the Falcons, especially if, their starters play a lot more. So it'll be interesting to see their defensive starters play a lot more. So it'll be interesting to see what the Kyle Shanahan offense can do against, Darrelle Revis and Muhammad Wilkerson and Leonard Williams and all those guys this week. So my question is to you, Scott, is there anybody or anything that you want to see more of this week? And is there anybody or anything that you want to see less of this week against the Jets?
I want to see more Mapanga playing with the first string. Maybe not the first string, but right after that. Put him in instead of Bierman with that second group that's Goodman and Embu and Jarrett. Let me see how he looks with that group. I think that would be a fun group to watch. They're all young. They're all hungry. They're all good fits. I want to see more Malachi Goodman rotating in a little bit with the higher strings as well. I thought he looked great coming off the ball. He reminded me a lot of the Malachi Goodman I was watching at Clemson. He sets the edge well. He uses his hands well. All he really needs to do is learn some pass rushing moves, and I think he'd be a good base defensive end, and I think he could end up eventually taking that spot and looking a lot like a Michael Bennett light, if that makes any sense. So.
Okay. I mentioned it before. I want to see Renfrey get more work with the twos. I want to see him, I assume the starters will play a full quarter this week. But I do want to see Renfrey get some first half work and see whether he can keep it up. I want to see more Adrian Claiborne. I don't mind Jonathan Babineau getting a rest and basically playing 4 snaps. He's 33 years old. He doesn't need to prove anything at this point in his career. But I do want to see more of Claiborne. I want to see him do, I want to see him play. He looked good for 5 plays last week, and I want to see more of him. I want to see him get some work at end. Yeah, that's the main thing. Obviously, I want to see certain guys that didn't play particularly well play better. I want to see Jalen Collins play better. I want to see, see if Roddy White still has, that gas left in the tank to see how he does against guys like Cromartie and Revis. Obviously, I want to see Julio Jones burn my man Darrelle Revis. So those are the things I'm looking forward to this week. All right. So, Scott, we got a lot of mailbag questions. You want to jump into those?
Yeah, we probably should.
All right. Andrew Schauwaller asks, do you guys believe this could be Matt Ryan's and Julio Jones' breakout year?
I mean, I feel like they both already had breakout years, but I mean, if you could have insane years for both of them, 5,000 yards for Ryan, 2,000 for Julio, 40 touchdowns for Ryan, I could see it being that kind of year if everything clicks on all cylinders and the running game gets going.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. I don't really, I think Matt Ryan's breakout year was probably 2012. I don't, this might be his sort of bounce back year where, he's been productive the last 2 years, but most people don't talk about him because the Falcons have been good. With Julio, if his breakout year was probably 2012. I mean, just go back and watch the NFC Championship game. That game was better than most receivers' entire season. But I do think maybe this year he'll get in the end zone a little bit more, and people will be talking about him as a fantasy superstar a little bit more than they are right now, even though I still think most rankings still have him in the top 3 or 4 receivers. So it's not as if, people are sleeping on Julio Jones. Yeah. At Vin Cruz asks, does Julio make Ryan great or vice versa?
I think they both make each other great. It's chicken or the egg argument, but Ryan was already good before Julio came in. Ryan was good back in 2009, 2010, 2008. He was good. He didn't need Tony Gonzalez or, Roddy. Well, he did kind of need Roddy White to look good because who else was going to catch those passes outside of like Harry Douglas, kind of, you know? But Ryan doesn't need these guys to look amazing. But a smart GM says, hey, I've got a franchise quarterback. Let me get him a good tight end. Let me get him a good wide receiver. Let me get him some more receivers and tight ends and offensive linemen to make sure that he's good to go. You can't sit there and be like, hey, Julio's great because of Ryan, or Ryan's great because of Julio. No, Julio's great because Julio is a ridiculous athlete and got drafted into the perfect situation with a franchise quarterback who's great for him, with a wide receiver who can be a mentor for him, with one of the best wide receiver coaches of all time, and with an offense that makes sense for his skills. That's why Julio's great. Because he could have been drafted by the Raiders, and then he would have been fucked. Ryan's great because Matt Ryan is a naturally great football player. He was dropped into a situation that sucked, with an offensive line that was unproven, without a proven running back that was a full-time running back, because Michael Turner, no one really knew what Michael Turner was at the time. The only thing Ryan had at the time that he knew was even semi-proven was Roddy White, who had just come off of a breakout year where maybe it wasn't Roddy White's best, effort. We had no idea if Roddy was just a flash in the pan one-year wonder. That was the other thing. Roddy had that great year, but could he have just been that one-year wonder? So Ryan's a naturally great football player.
Yeah. This is an interesting question. In general, I tend to believe in principle that a great quarterback does more for his wide receiver than vice versa. As Scott alluded to, Matt Ryan was already a good quarterback before Julio got there. I will say the one thing, though, that Julio does make Ryan look better than probably he naturally is throwing the deep ball. I think Julio caught like 50% of his deep passes last year, which is very good. I think Ryan completed maybe like 35% of all his other deep passes. So, a lot of, in terms of just throwing it to Julio, it's just like, I'm just going to chuck it up and Julio's going to go get the football. And so I think that probably is the one area where Julio makes Ryan look better than he probably is, but that's about it. I think otherwise, I think both players would still be great without each other. But I do think, obviously, quarterbacks, I think, are less dependent on wide receivers than wide receivers are on quarterbacks. I think that's just the natural function of football. Wide receiver can't catch the ball unless someone throws it to him. So that's what I'll say. All right. Evan Birchfield asks, Ryan to Julio looked great, but do you think Roddy is slowly being phased out of the new offense?
Ooh, that's a loaded question. Ryan to Julio did look amazing. I think it's because the best possible fit for the offense is Julio's the number one, Roddy is the number two, tight end is the number three. But Roddy being slowly phased out, you can't tell anything on one drive about player usage. Roddy's still going to get his. He just doesn't have to get his right at the beginning of the game anymore, like he used to. Back in 2007, 2008, you get Roddy in the game early, keep him interested, and that's what made him good. Now, Roddy's been there, done that. He doesn't have to be used early. He's going to play his function on the team and be good to go. He won't get bored. You don't have to worry about any of that. He'll be there ready to play.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know how to answer this question. Roddy's probably still going to have, 80-something catches, 1,000 yards this season. But is he going to be this sort of go-to option in the offense that he has been, for the 7 years that he was? from 07 to 2013. No, not really. He's just kind of like, oh, they're doubling Julio. Okay, Roddy's against this, Creston Butler or whoever, who's covering him. I'll throw it to Roddy, and he'll make plays then. But yeah, I don't know if that's him being slowly phased. I think this age is catching up to Roddy, and he's not as good as he once was, and he's not going to be as big a factor. He'll get, they'll throw him the ball 8 or 9 times a game. He'll catch 5 or 6 of them. He'll get his 50 or 60 yards every week, and that's what he'll be. And, some weeks that'll be important because he'll be, that option in the red zone like he was a lot of times last year with all the attention on Julio. And Roddy would just sneak out of the back on a throwback or something like that, or on a rub route and get open, and he'll score touchdowns, and that's what he'll be. He's a complimentary player at this point in his career. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's what it is. So if that's him being phased out of the offense, then so be it. But I don't think that's because of Kyle Shanahan. I think that's just, that would have been the case regardless of if we had a new offense. That's just age catching up to him. Okay. Colin Hubbard, friend of the show, asks, would you agree that Leonard Hankerson is a lot better than people give him credit for?
Yes, a lot better. A lot better than I even thought he was looking in past tape. He could be, for the Falcons in 2015, what Brian Finneran was for the Falcons in 08 to 2010. That third down option, that possession option, that outside receiver, especially in the goal line area, while Roddy was a slot receiver running that underneath drag. So someone to distract, someone to let Roddy play in the slot, someone to give Roddy some feature time by being the outside receiver and looking like a solid outside receiver.
Okay. Yeah, I hate to be the negative one. I don't really hate it, but I embrace it. I think Hankerson, is he better than people give him credit for? Sure. Do I feel like, when we signed him, I was basically like, he's a number 4 wide receiver. Do I feel that much differently today? Not really. But I'm more optimistic about him being better than that, I guess. So that's what I'll say. But based off of what he did against the Titans, I'm not ready to say that he's going to be, one of these top 10, top 15, number 3 wide receivers in the NFL. Maybe he can be. He's fine. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong. I don't. It's going to be construed as me thinking he sucks or something like that. That's not what I'm saying. It's just he's good, but one third down reception doesn't suddenly make you, on par with DeAndre Hopkins or whatever. I don't know, but we'll see.
Well, a lot of people thought that he just plain sucked. So I think what he's saying is maybe he's going to be a solid option for the offense, not someone who's going to get cut when all said and done. Okay,
that's fair. Yeah, and yes. When we signed him, I thought there wasn't a guarantee that he would make the team. So I think there's pretty much guaranteed he's going to make the team. So that means he's better. That's a fair point. Okay. Evan Birchfield has another question for us. If Hardy, White, and Julio are on the field, is Roddy the slot?
I think if Hardy, White, and Julio are all on the field at the same time, you could put any one of those 3 in the slot. And you could put any one of those 3 outside. And you could run trip bunch formations. And you could have a lot of fun with those 3 on the field because they could all play anywhere. So, Roddy will be slot sometimes. Julio will be slot sometimes. And I think with Kyle Shanahan, we'll actually see them all used in all sorts of different ways, which is what we've needed to see for years.
Yep. I think Hardy and Roddy's best spots on the field are in the slot. I think that is where they are most effective. So I think if Hardy and Roddy are sharing the field at the same time, I do think to a certain degree one of them is being marginalized unless they're going 4 wides with both of those guys in the slot on either side of the offensive line. So that's what I'll say. But, I think, I agree with Scott. I think you'll see guys getting moved around. Hankerson's played in the slot. He can play outside. Obviously, we saw Julio getting moved around quite a bit. Shanahan has already made a point that he'll move guys around. So it's not going to be as sort of strict. Like last year, basically, Devin Hester played I think 75 or 80% of his snaps in the slot last year. And I think, prior to that, Harry Douglas spent, 60, 70% of his time in the slot. It's not going to be as strict as it was under Mike Mularkey and Dirk Cutter. So I think there's going to be a lot more movement, and it's going to make it harder for defenses to game plan against the Falcons because they can't simply say, oh, our slot corner is going to cover Justin Hardy or Roddy White the entire game. No, some places going to cover Julio, some places going to cover Hankerson. And, it's not strictly easy for defenses to match up that way, especially when you're lining up against Julio Jones. So it's a positive thing for the defense. All right. Nick Pasqualone says, do you guys actually think Stone is better than Asamoah?
No. Just no.
Yeah, that's it. No, I don't think he's better.
Asamoah is potentially a top 10 NFL guard. And even if he plays below his top level, he's still a top 15 NFL guard. James Stone, on the other hand, is a very, very good backup. A versatile guy, someone you want to have on your team, someone who's not going to get cut, someone who's not going to look like Peter Kahns. But at the same time, he's still an undrafted free agent who didn't look great last year, who was only playing because 2 guys ahead of him got injured, and has no business in a starting lineup without more seasoning. He didn't show the promise that guys like Schrader did early in his career. He looked mediocre, and he looks improved. I'll give him that this year, but he still doesn't look starting caliber in the NFL. He's still got a long way to go. Technically, just still has a lot of work to do. But it's not super scary to see him out there anymore. So there's a plus.
Okay. I'll give Stone a little bit more credit than Scott's giving him. I do think he could be starting caliber. We'll have to see. Obviously, playing, 9 or 10 snaps on one game against the Titans doesn't exactly prove that. So we'll have to see what the rest of the summer bears out. But maybe he is starting caliber. But that doesn't mean he's as good as John Asamoah. As Scott said, John Asamoah is one of the 10 or 15 best guards in the NFL. And basically being starting caliber basically means you're in the top 30 or 40. So, until James Stone goes out there and just, if he kicks Leonard Williams' butt this week, then, we'll be having a different conversation. Or Sheldon Richardson's butt this week, or whoever the Jets are playing up front this week, then we'll have a different conversation next week. But until that happens, then no. All right. Jonathan Rod, 3Rod, asks, any idea what the Falcons are planning on doing with John Asamoah?
Starting him on the offensive line at guard. But they want him to earn the spot.
Okay. I said the exact same thing last week, but now this week I'm going to change. I think they're going to trade him. I think they're setting it up to trade him. I think they want Stone, whatever the coaching staff don't always make great decisions. I think they want Stone and Chester to be the guys. I think they want Person to be the backup for whatever reason. And I think they're going to end up trading John Asamoah. So I think that's what they're planning on doing. The fact that they, benched him the second day of training camp, I think we overlooked it at the time, but I do think it's telling that, they're prepared to move on. I think they're going to end up trading him at the end of the camp.
Who are they going to get for him?
I have no idea. I think that's going to bear out on what injuries we have at the end of the training camp. It's an unfortunate thing to say, but at some point someone's going to have a season-ending injury because it happens for every team in the summer. So that might have bear out on who we get, but I have no idea. It would be 2,000% speculation at this point. Maybe a backup in the secondary, maybe another offensive lineman, maybe a backup quarterback, maybe a running back. I have no idea, so we'll see.
Yeah, I'm just kind of looking and seeing if there's anything out there that's worth bringing in, and the only thing I can think of is trading him back to the Chiefs and bringing in Aaron Murray.
Okay, I can live with that. All right. So Evan Birchfield asks, I think we answered this, but I guess we'll briefly hit it again. He asks, what's your initial thoughts on the offensive line play following the Titans game?
Much better at pass blocking, but the 3-step drops will help them. And the run blocking looks a lot more coordinated, but they still have a good while to go.
Yeah. The run blocking wasn't much. The pass blocking, I thought we got to see opportunities with the backups do some actual pass sets, and Tyler Columbus aside, I thought they handled themselves pretty well. I will be interested to see the starting group do some standard sets, a lot of play action, which basically means that they could, come off as run blockers as opposed to dropping back. So, I'm looking forward to see how they hold up against the Jets, especially their formidable front this week, if they have to, do strict normal pass drops. And, of course, when we play Miami, obviously I want to see, if they can block Ndamukong Suh and Cameron Wake. And, so those are my thoughts. All right. Justin Davis asks, do you think Coleman and Freeman will be ready for Philly?
I don't think they have to be ready for Philly. I do think they will be. I just don't think that they have to be ready. I don't think both of them have to be ready. As long as one of them is good to go, the Falcons should be fine. But they should both be fully healthy by the time the Philly game rolls around.
Yeah, it sounds like they're going to be healthy by the end of this week. So unless they have a setback, then I think they'll be healthy, ready for Philly. All right. Well, Evan, your next question, we answered this already. Who stood out? His next question is, any noticeable differences between the way the offense was used in the Smith era compared to the Titans game?
I mean, it's like night and day. Smith never used zone blocking. It was always man and gap blocking. He never used the West Coast style passing attack. Atlanta went straight to a West Coast style passing attack to take advantage of Ryan. Malarkey and Cutter both believed in vertical stretch the field type passing deals, where the Shanahan style is, let's take a West Coast attack and a zone running game, marry them together, and hope for the best. And it works out really well because there's a lot of rollouts, a lot of play actions, and a lot of things that you haven't seen the Falcons run in a while. The scheme is almost exactly what Greg Knapp was trying to run from 04 to 06, except Shanahan's got a legitimate quarterback. He's got legitimate, wide receivers to run, and then he's got legitimate just talent to work with. The only thing that they had better in 04 to 06 was Algie Crumpler was in his prime.
Yeah, and I probably work done at that point was probably better than Devontae.
Yeah, work done was better.
Yeah, after that point, not the case. But yeah, I think play action is the big thing. That's the core. The running game and the play action are the core principles of this offense, which we haven't seen. We didn't see last time we saw that with Mike Smith was 08, maybe 09. After that, they kind of went away from that, which is fine because Matt Ryan was better. But yeah, so that's the main thing. That's the main takeaway. A lot of play action this year. Okay, so Evan Birchfield has another question. Thanks for like the 28 questions, Evan, this week. Interesting matchups in the Jets game you hope to see.
Julio Jones versus Darrelle Revis. The offensive line of the Falcons versus the three-man defensive line of the Jets. How the Falcons are able to cover the running backs and receivers that the Jets have. Also, how the Falcons can get some pressure against one of the better left tackles, better centers in the game, in Nick Mangold and Brickashaw. So I'd like to see Vic Beasley somehow put the Brickashaw Ferguson on his ass for at least one play, just because I think it'd be hilarious to see a 235-pound defensive end do that to him. But those are the big things.
Yeah, same thing. I'm really curious to see, what Todd Bowles can do with that defense against the Falcons offense, especially whether the offensive line holds up. We kind of know what our skill position players are, the running backs excluded. I'm also curious to see, our corners, especially if Trufant doesn't play. I want to see how they fare against Brandon Marshall and Eric Decker. Now, Marshall and Decker aren't the players they were, 2 or 3 years ago when they were, top 5 productive wide receivers, but they're still, the quote-unquote savvy veteran. So it'll be interesting to see how Phillip Adams holds up against that. He'll be playing against his old team. It'll be interesting if Jalen Collins gets some first-team reps, and obviously Robert Alford, who we're hoping has a big year, wasn't really tested against the Titans. It'll be interesting to see how he gets tested. So some of those matchups are the ones I'm paying attention to. All right, Evan Birchfield has another question. What do you think will happen with Yates?
I think he's going to lose the job and end up getting cut by the end of the season, or by the end of the preseason.
Yeah, it seemed, unless he can, he basically saved his butt last week in the Week 4 preseason game where, he hit that deep ball to Freddie Martino. And that was really the only thing that won him the job. I don't see that sort of thing coming this summer, so I think he'll probably get cut. And I think it'll either be Renfrey or somebody from the outside. And speaking of someone on the outside, Evan Birchfield asked, where would Rex Grossman fit into our quarterback depth?
He would be the backup quarterback ahead of anybody else, which would be super desperate and probably not the right move, but it'd be the move. It'd be like when the Falcons signed Steve DeBerg before the 98 season.
It's good comp. I like that. I do think Shanahan loves him some Sex Cannon. He brought him to Cleveland last year. Obviously, he had him for 2 or 3 years in Washington. He knows the offense. And, unless Renfrey can, ball out these next 3 games, especially with some second-team work, I don't see why you wouldn't sign him. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. I'm one of those people that thinks the Falcons' backup quarterback situation is a little bit more problematic than most people. I think most people just say, Matt Ryan's not going to get hurt, so no big deal. But I'm always a little nervous about when you have a bad backup against a really good starter. So we'll see what happens. All right. Jonathan Rod, the 3-Rod asks, with so much cap left, you guys think we will make some type of trade for offensive line, tight end, or anything to improve?
I think if there's anything that the Falcons do, it's bring in Evan Mathis. If they bring in Evan Mathis and then trade away John Asamoah, that would make some sense. Other than that, I can't really see anything they can do to improve. I don't think trading for a tight end would really do anything because the kind of tight end they need, I feel like they've already got. Between Tammy and if Toilolo can show he's this improved version that we've been seeing, the Falcons might have some solid tight ends. So,
okay, yeah. Obviously, Evan Mathis is a name we've been talking about for weeks now. I'll throw another name out there, given the issues our backup centers had this past week. Chris Myers is still out there. If the Falcons are, I don't feel comfortable right now with Mike Person being Joe Hawley's backup. And I don't feel comfortable with Peter Collins being his backup. So, Chris Myers, come to Atlanta. So, obviously I mentioned earlier that John Asamoah, I think he'll probably get traded. I don't know for what, but I do probably think there's probably one major move. I do think the Falcons will be a lot more active after the cuts are made this season with Dan Quinn having final say over the 53-man roster. I don't think he's going to settle as much as Mike Smith did and Thomas Dimitroff did when they had shared final say. So I think we'll see some moves happen as we get into the first week of September before the season starts. So I don't know what those moves are going to be, but I think we'll see them. All right. At Matt Stars asks, realistically, can we stop multiple wide receiver sets with our current DBs, especially if we take on any injuries?
If the Falcons have injuries to Moore and Trufant for any given time, probably not. It'd be very tough. With Moore and Trufant healthy, I think they could take on 3-4 wide receivers easily. It's just you got to have those guys healthy. Got to have those guys healthy.
Yeah. I think we kind of knew that the secondary, their depth wasn't going to be as strong going into this summer. And I think we were just kind of relying on, the pass rush picking up the slack. I feel confident that Kevin White could be, that nickel guy. I think, Phillip Adams looked a little bit better than I was expecting, or has played better this training camp than I was expecting. I think Collins will eventually get there. We'll see when that is. So it is a little bit of concern if we're going to play a team like the Packers or somebody like that, I'd be worried. But, the positive thing is, unless Victor Cruz comes back to the Giants, there aren't, off the top of my head, I can't think of any teams that can really spread us out and hurt us early in the season. So I don't think it's as big a deal as it might have been in past years. So we'll see how it works out. But all right. At sniper_4_life as progression of Hageman? ?
Yeah, there was progression. There's a lot of progression. He's off the ball quicker. He looks about 20 pounds lighter. I realize he probably only lost like 5 pounds and shifted a bunch of weight around, but still, he looks a ton lighter. He's super quick off the snap. His pad level is still too high. But at 6'6", you're going to see that. His hands still need a little bit more work, but as a second-year player, you're going to see that. But he looked a lot better. His run defense was better. His break off the ball was better. His getting into the backfield against the pass was better. Still got some work to go. No questions there. But he's worth keeping on the roster and as a starter, as a guy who's going to come in and play 60% of the snaps and let Babineau come in on third downs and nickel sets and let Babineau come in and be the pass rusher. Let him take all those run block snaps that Babineau doesn't need to take. And then have Babineau come in on the nickel and the sub and be fine.
Yeah. I think, Hageman was a raw guy coming out. And, history has taught me that when you're a guy whose hand use was as poor as his at Minnesota, it takes the better part of 3 years to get there, historically speaking. So we'll see progress this year with how he uses his hands. We saw it last year, but it wasn't as if he went from, night and day. So it's probably not going to be the case this year. The beautiful thing about Hageman is now he's put in a scheme where he doesn't have to, at least this year, doesn't have to be this sort of all-world player. They're asking him to do what he does best, which is use his strength and his power to be disruptive. And a lot of times he can just fire off the ball and make plays doing that in that 3 technique role. He's going to only be one gapping and all that type of stuff. So, he's in a position where he should be very effective. He's not going to be asked to be this sort of every down pass rushing maven. He's going to play in a base package, so he'll get a lot of work on first and second down, and then he'll be pulled off the field so that they can still refine his pass rush. So it's one of those things where everything is pointing up with Hageman, and I think he's right on track to be a very effective player. Yeah. So we'll see how effective, but I think he'll be good this year. I'm not quite ready to put him on the playing field of Gerald McCoy or anybody like that, but I think he can be very good this year. So we'll see what happens. Okay, at Dirtyberg, Jake asks, still looking for a legitimate explanation for Beasley's undershirt.
I have no idea what he's talking about. So
I wish I did too. I have no idea what he's talking about either.
Legitimate explanation is, dude, it's a fucking undershirt. Who gives a shit? There's your legitimate explanation. Who gives a shit?
I wish I was in on a joke, Jake. I'm sorry. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay. Our boy Cookie by Nature asks, why are some of these linemen still on the team? They are terrible.
Well, Peter Kahn's is still on the team because he's still on his rookie contract, and they figured why waste the roster spot on someone who might cost a little more. Some of these guys are still on rookie contracts, like Kahn's, like Holmes, or they're on super cheap contracts like Tyler Columbus or Jared Smith or Adam Raplavel. So you're going to see some awful football players on the roster. Welcome to NFL football. There are players who should not be sniffing an NFL roster on every single roster this time of year. So it's just part of the thing. As Marines like to say, embrace the suck. There's going to be a little bit of that in the fucking preseason.
Yeah, I mean, you got to have bodies to get to the training camp. So that's why some of these guys, some of the guys that I'm assuming you're referring to, Peter Kahn's, Tyler Columbus, don't look long for this world. So, maybe they turn it around, but yeah, they're not good. All right. At Jalen Muhammad asks, any doubt in your minds that Des Southward needs to play safety?
I mean, as a reserve, there's no doubt, because he can't be worse than what Baker or Teresi looked like. Yeah, Teresi got that interception, but if it's not tipped, it's not a pick. No doubt in my mind. Southward needs to be back at safety as the backup to Ricardo Allen and just basically give Allen the job. Allen looked competent. Southward could at least look coherent. The other two guys don't.
Yeah, I got a little doubt. So I think the Falcons are going to go out and get a safety. If guys don't step up on Friday, if Teresi doesn't look better, if Godfrey doesn't look better, if Baker doesn't look better, they need to go out and get a safety. I don't think it's Southward. I think he's a body. I think, they're giving him his chance. I think he could very well go to another team and be successful. But it ain't going to be the Falcons, in my opinion. So that dream is dying. But maybe I'm wrong. Who knows? It wouldn't be the first time. It would just be the second time. All right. Nigel ATL asks, would I be out of reach if I said Ricardo Allen has Devin McCourty upside?
Yes. Yes, you would. Not knocking Ricardo Allen. He's a hard worker. He's a solid tackler. He's a smart coverage guy. But he is not Devin McCourty. He is not Earl Thomas. He is not any of these amazingly ridiculous safeties. And that is perfectly okay. He does not have to be any of those guys. He doesn't have to be he doesn't have to be Eric Weddle or Harrison Smith or Devin McCourty. All he has to be is someone on the same level as, I don't know, Duke Williams or Hussein Abdullah or, what Dwight Lowery was last year. If he can be that same level as what Dwight Lowery was last year, the Falcons will be fine. Obviously way better in coverage, but the same kind of level safety. The Falcons will be fine.
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to compare somebody like Ricardo Allen to probably the second or third best safety in the NFL and say he has similar upside. Devin McCourty was a first-round pick. I think it was like the 21st overall pick when he got drafted.
Yep.
So as a cornerback, so obviously he was very, very talented cornerback. Didn't quite work out, and they moved him to safety, and he's been a very, very talented free safety. He had a great rookie season, didn't struggle the second year. I don't think Ricardo Allen has that same sort of upside. I think he can be a very good safety. I'm a little bit more optimistic about that than I have been for most of this summer after the Titans game. But yeah, I'm not going to put him on that level. You're right. Basically, if he's just an above average starter, that's a great season for Ricardo Allen. That's really all I'm hoping for. I'm not going to ask him to be Devin McCourty or Earl Thomas or any of those other guys that Scott named. So,
and if the defense is good, it's because he was an above average safety. Like if the defense is good against the pass, it's because he filled his role. All he has to do is fill his role and be above average, and the Falcons will have a much better team this year. And if he can give the Falcons 4 or 5 picks on top of that, then he's done more than what was asked.
Yeah. Yep. All right. Big boy Brewski comes in with, I think, our last question. He asks, first thoughts on Tyson Jackson.
Thank God Tyson Jackson and Rashid Hageman worked out with Jay Glazer this offseason. Their hands look so much better than they did last year. They also look about 25 to 30 pounds less each guy. Tyson Jackson, he must have been pushing 325 last year. And now he's playing that Red Bryant role, which is actually a pretty decent role for him and fits what the Falcons need. So he looked a lot better. He was setting the edge well. He was eating doubles. He was looking like the Tyson Jackson that I thought the Falcons signed last year. So he's worth keeping at this point.
Yep. I thought, for the 5 plays he got, I thought Tyson Jackson looked pretty good. For the 50 plays he played last summer, I don't think I ever said that about him. At that time, people were like, oh, calm down. The Falcons' run defense is good. He's doing his job, blah, 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 blah. And I was like, no, he's not very good. He has no first step whatsoever. Whatever, how much weight he ever lost this offseason, 10 pounds, 15 pounds, whatever, has done him a world of good because he's actually exploding off the snap a little bit. Obviously, no one's going to put him up there with, Cliff Averill or Robert Mathis in terms of his first step quickness, but it's one of those things where it's like, oh, he actually looks like the guy that deserved it, or not deserved, but you could construe him as why the Chiefs thought he was worth the 3rd overall pick 6 years ago. So it's one of those things where I thought Jackson looks good, and I hope he keeps it up. So.
Me too. If he can come in, play 20 plays a game exactly like he did this past week, Atlanta's going to have a great run defender, and they'll have a guy who is worth half of what he got paid. Because he'll never be worth all of what he got paid unless he's a 10-sack guy. But he'll be worth at least half of what he got paid.
Okay. Well, folks, that's our show. Next week, we will be talking about what we thought about the Jets game. Hopefully, the Falcons get another win, play some fast and physical defense, more play action on offense, Julio Jones roasting Darrelle Revis, all that jazz. If you have a Falcons mailbag question that you want answered on the next week's show, use the hashtag Falcons mailbag. Tweet at Scott at Karasik PFS. I am at FalcFans. Check out our stuff on Pro Football Spot and FalcFans.com respectively. And yeah, that's it.